So the first thing that we start out with is shifting the bike into the smallest gear. This way we can remove the rear wheel, which helps us to clean the frame. Then we remove any customers attached components. Generally at the Grandis we don't actually wash bikes in a wash bay or anything like that. We don't generally hose bikes down. The reason for this is that generally you can clean a bike quite well in a stand with a spray-on cleaner. And when you're spraying something with a pressurized hose, you do risk getting water egress into bearing surfaces, which may not present instantly in the stand and can present an issue for the customer as time goes on. So the first thing that we do is we clean the frame very thoroughly, as this is an ideal time to inspect the frame for any cracks which may have resulted from crashes or anything like that. For a cleaner, there's no specific product that we would recommend for a complete bike wash. What we do recommend is that you use something like a car wash and wax or something like that diluted, and that's all you need. So you want to avoid using any petrochemicals or anything like that. No automotive products or degreasers or anything like that needs to be near a bike for these purposes. One recommendation that we would have is to use a flannelette rag. Anything else is just not as good really. So when cleaning a bike with an electronic group set in particular, we'd always recommend being careful around the cable areas so that you don't get snagged on one and get it jammed on a chainring or something like that. Because if you did something like that, it'd be quite easy to then pull it out of the derailleur or out of where it plugs into the frame or damage the cable and stuff like that. When you're cleaning a carbon wheel, it's important to make sure that you get the braking surface completely dry before you reassemble the bike. Otherwise you'll have some issues with squealing and all of that sort of thing. So while we have the wheel out of the bike, it's the ideal time to give the cassette a clean. Depending on how dirty the cassette is, we may actually need to pull it off and put it through a parts washer. If the home user has a parts washer, we would recommend filling it with a Rontus cleaner. That's what we use in ours. We previously used a kerosene-based cleaner, but we found it was quite harsh on components and it presented some problems when you were trying to clean it before you reapplied lube. If you have any petroleum distillates left on a bearing surface or a wear surface, when you're trying to reapply lube, it'll drive away all of that lubrication that you're trying to put in there, and that's where you have issues later on. So we would absolutely not recommend cleaning your bike or components with petroleum distillates or degreasers, automotive degreasers, simply for those reasons. You can do it and get away with it sometimes, but the amount of cleaning that you have to do after to rid the surface of all of that, it's just not worth it. The Rontus stuff, it's plant-based. It's nowhere near as harsh as automotive products on bicycle components. It's more friendly to reapplying lube and all of that sort of thing. And so it saves you a bit of work, but it also saves you a fair bit of money, because if you do clean your bike with petroleum distillates, you're wearing out bearings, you're wearing out chains, you're wearing out cassettes. If that goes unchecked, you wear out chain rings, you bring your bike in for a service, all of a sudden you're up for several $100s. So using the Rontus stuff's actually helped us out a lot, saved us a bit of time in the workshop, and we're actually seeing longer wear life out of all the customers' components. So as we go through the cassette, make sure you wedge it all the way down to dislodge any of the dirt that's on the cassette spaces. And also, as you go, you may need to change sections of the rag that you work on. So at this stage of the service, we've carried out a visual inspection of the frame after our clean and ensured that there's no issues with that we need to alert the customer to. We've carried out an inspection of the cassette and all the hub bearings and the rims on both wheels and ensured that everything's well within tolerance, nothing needs attention. So the next step in our service, after we've done all of that, we now check the chain. We check the chain before we clean it, obviously, because if it's worn out, there's not much point spending time cleaning it. With a Campagnolo chain, the wear is measured differently to Shimano or SRAM or other manufacturers' chains. Their specification for a worn chain is when 10 links reach or exceed 132.6 millimeters. If it's anything under that, no problem at all, continue to ride. But as soon as one section of the chain reaches 132.6 millimeters, then it's due for replacement. So we start out, make sure that your vernier is zeroed. So we had 132.3, 132.1 and 132.2. So the wear on this chain is really good. We don't need to replace it. The customer doesn't need to be alerted to any of that. So now we can clean the chain. So to clean a chain, a lot of people think that you need to use a chain bath or you need to pull it off and clean it with a toothbrush, that sort of thing. Often they'll use automotive degreaser, which is simply too harsh for bicycles, or they'll use kerosene or petrol, and that may have been fine 30 years ago on bikes then, but when we have 11-speed bikes these days, they're operating at an extremely fine tolerance. A millimetre can be the difference between a perfectly working group set and a group set that's not working at all. So it's really important to use bicycle-specific products when you're cleaning or lubricating your bike, because it is formulated specifically for bikes. So we take some of that Orontis cleaner, just spray it onto a rag. Again, a flannelette rag is preferred because it will absorb and grab most of the dirt and grime. Then all we need to do, grab the bottom rung of the chain and then twist it, and then backpedal the chain through the rag. While you're doing this, you vary the pressure by squeezing on the top and the sides of the chain, and that's really all you need to do. From time to time during this process, you'll need to change the section of the rag that you're using. As you can see, we've already managed to pull quite a lot of dirt and grime off this chain. We continue this process until it becomes relatively clean as it passes through the rag. As you can see, this is what we started out with. And on the second pass, we're already down to this much. So for lubricating a chain, we would recommend Orontis Type A or Type B lubricant. The Type A is for the summer or warmer months to medium conditions, and the Type B is for the medium conditions through to winter. So for this particular customer, I'm going to use the Type A lubricant as we're tending towards the summer and the warmer months, and the bike is generally kept well maintained. If the bike isn't regularly cleaned and lubricated, then we would probably use the Type B lubricant as it will last a bit longer for the customer. So to lubricate a chain, we always lubricate the bottom rung of the chain. We never spray it up and down the cassette or on the top rung. The reason for this is that centrifugal force actually forces the lubricant outward as you pedal. So often if a customer or another shop has lubricated the chain on the top, or they've sprayed lube up and down the cassette, what we end up with is a huge grimy mess all over the seat stays and the chain stays. So if you go on the bottom rung of the chain, as soon as you start riding and pedaling, all the lube actually gets forced outwards into the chain, which is where we want it.